So this SDK, if we want to just have a test run and get the feel for how it works, then I think we should build an Iris app. And just to reiterate, an Iris app is both marketplace details, so you get an icon, some pictures, a video, some marketing material, and ways to install it, right? Then we have, you can contribute reports into this Iris app. You can also choose not to. You can also have 10 reports. It's really up to you. You can contribute into the asset home. You can create what we call custom fields. I'll come into that in a minute. And then you have fleet extensions. So you can have the full perspective on a fleet. And again, you can have many of those. It's really up to you. Building an Iris app is not meant only for the marketplace. I don't know if we mentioned that, but I think many of you have tried to do an extension of some platform out there, and it's not always nice to be demanded, oh, you have to use our UI library. I'm used to Bootstrap, so I'll just use that. If your customer doesn't care, and if it's a one-off, then use our platform anyway. It's a white space, right? So you can build whatever you want. You can add Bootstrap if you want. We're just not going to add it to our marketplace. Because if it's on our marketplace, it means that everybody can install it. And in that case, we want to have a bit more control. So we're trying to be loose when it's one-offs. And that's what developers like, right? If it's just something that just should slack together and then be done with it, then that's fine. But if it's something that is meant for being sold on the marketplace for all our customers, then the quality has to be a little bit higher. So let's build it. So I use VS Code, and in here I've already set up an NX workspace. And then I will start on the developer hub that Kasper showed you before. So this is the getting started guide, right? Normally I would spend time on creating a workspace with NX. I don't want to spend the time on that because it's just going to download a lot of stuff. Doesn't really bring value. The next step, once you've done that, is install our Iris app library. So I'm going to do that. And this just allows NX to understand that now there's a new generator available. This generator can then generate an Iris app or an extension or many extensions to the Iris app. And that's really what we wanted, right? So the next step in the getting started guide here is create your first app. So I'm just going to copy that. Kasper says we're lazy, right? And today we're going to create a contact app. That's actually not something we have today, so we're just going to build it. This contact app, when I'm creating it, it will create a new application called Contact. It will update my NX workspace, so NX understands now there's a new project. It will also add a manifest with some same defaults, so you don't have to spend too much time on it. And like Kasper said, this includes TypeScript. So when I hover, I get the help. If I want to add a custom field, I can just say, give me a custom field definition. It's an array. And in here, I can say a title and so on. So custom fields is a way to extend our platform. Remember, this is not only UI, right? So let's say we want to capture the owner of a machine who owns that cat and his phone number, because then whenever I'm on site, I can just look at the machine, zoom in on my location and click on the cat, and I can see who owns this machine. Really nice feature. We haven't built it, so let's build that. The custom field definitions, I'm just going to steal that from over here, because otherwise it's just don't want to waste your time. There we go. But I'll go through it. So custom fields have a type. The type can be a string. It can be phone number. It can be email, and so on. So there's a long list of custom definitions. And again, reading up on the documentation out here, I can see there are some functions that you can use inside the Iris apps. There's a way to retrieve data, and then there's storing data. And this is really where it's interesting, right? So I want to define a custom field. I can read up the documentation here, or just autocomplete inside my VS Code. I'm a developer, right? So I know how to navigate that. Documentation is, whatever. We don't really understand it, but it has to be there, right? We're building a platform. So here, there are different types of extensions and different values for each of those. The matrix is not easy to draw up like this, but if you have a dropdown, of course, there are more values, and you can choose whether it's a multi-select dropdown or not. And we have a way of do replacement. So if you're actually upgrading an Iris app and saying, all right, now we release a new version and I'm changing this value to something else in the dropdown, then it'll run through a migration step for you. So really easy to work with. And the same goes when we try to hook it into the UI, right? So first off, we build a string. It's for the type asset. Assets are everything available in our application. We also have an organization. That's why we have to specify it. We can give it a key, whatever string key. In this case, that means it's the title. It's called name. In other words, in our UI, we'll say name, and then it's a text field. That's what it says right here, at least. We can say it is editable in the UI, which means that if you're not doing anything, we actually have a specification page on the asset home where we're going to show these custom fields. So you don't have to do any UI. You can just create the definition and then it shows up for all of these custom fields. It could also be custom fields that you want to track on all machines that are never going to be visible in our UI, but it's going to be used for some computation in your backends where you have a way of pushing data into that custom field. So it's part of our platform. So you don't have to maintain the storage of it. And the same goes with the visible in our UI. So we can hide it in our standard UI. That doesn't mean you cannot push it into your own UI. And then normal min-max value, the default string. Next one is the phone number, again, attached to the asset. This is called phone number key. And the title for that is just going to be phone number. Again, it's editable, it's visible, and then there's a default value. I'm just going to save that. And then we actually have our Iris app. Now, this Iris app, as you remember, is just a marketplace entry, right? We haven't built an extension yet. It's not there's no report, there's no fleet, there's no asset home. In this case, we want to attach it to the asset home. So we go back to the getting started guide and say, I want to create an extension. In this case, you're again using the already installed dependency and you're using NX's generator to call extend. So we will do an extension called contact details. Then it asks you what subdirectory do you want to use. And that's us trying to help you guide you to a decent folder structure. So all your libraries, if you, in this repo, I can build 100 apps and they can have 120 libraries underneath. But if 20 of them are all related to the same thing called contact, then it's really nice to group things by feature. That's also what I recommend if you start using NX. Under libs, group things by feature and not by domain. But feature is really something that can have both client and server side stuff in there. Then it's easy to talk about the ownership and divide that. We're going to call it contact. And then it asks me what type am I actually looking for. And I know it's an asset home extension. Then again, it's gonna live demos. Never mind, we'll play around and say we have already installed it. And luckily I did this half an hour ago and there it worked. We call it the owner app now. The owner app again has the exact same things defined here. And in libs folder, we pretend that I already created the owner details page. Inside this, we have an extension manifest. So every extension needs to describe itself. This is the piece that is loaded every time the manifest is loaded. So in here, we can say, all right, what should the menu item be? And where's the root of the source code for this? All kind of stuff that means that when we build it, it will become one JavaScript piece, right? So if you've noticed, we're not touching HTML or anything. And that's actually not the purpose of an Iris app. It is a JavaScript piece. It's a module federated package. It's a JavaScript piece that can be plugged into anything. Right now, we're plugging it into the iframe, but maybe in 2 years, it'll be on the iPhone. Maybe in 5 years, iframes have been replaced with something brand new in the HTML format that we all like. We'll see about that, but at least we have the option, right? We control it. It's just a JavaScript package, so that's really nice for us. So this owner details is hooked up to the manifest in the extension list. So a part of the manifest is having a list of all the extensions that this manifest runs. And then in NX, there's this project JSON describing the project. And in there, you can have targets, and those targets can be run. So in here, I can just click on owner app serve, and it will serve my application. And then it is hooking up to our development environment and allows us to use the manager, in other words, the host running on our development environment. And then I can click this small button saying load the dev mode, which means I'm going to load the Iris app locally. This is a neat little feature where we're actually replacing the iframe with a version running on your local machine, because when you run locally, you want to control the CSV header, right? You don't want to sit around, oh, I need access to this, and then wait for someone from Trackunit and say, yes, it's approved. No, you develop your app with whatever you need, and then after the fact, we have to review it, and then we can approve deploying it into our marketplace. So with this, we can actually go into an asset here and see that there's now a tab called owner details. So this is not coming from the app, it's coming from the extension, right? Inside the extension, we have that manifest saying what is the menu item called. In there, we can also control when it should be visible, because say this was a special nice feature for a Manitou, but it's only available for this specific model number. Then we can control the visibility. And again, we do that in the manifest, so it can perform really nice. And we don't have to load any JavaScript code in order to determine whether it should be there or not. So the framework we're building is this piece out here and this piece out here. And then when you click on it, that's when you load your code. And that's really the key. Make sure that we can always perform well. And then based on what they told us, we can determine whether it should be visible or not. And we'll see if that sticks forever. We'll see. Maybe there's a version where we have to create some TypeScript, call that API with some data in order for them to tell us whether it makes sense. But the assumption is we can live with a simple yes, no. So when I click on this, I can see I just have a hello world. And of course, we didn't go there yet. But of course, the library for owner details has an application. Like we saw earlier, this index TSX is the kind of the entry point. And like I said, it's exposing a JavaScript package. And the only thing that I'm interested in is really these three methods here. I need to be able to bootstrap your code. I need to be able to mount it and unmount it. Now, right now, it doesn't really make any sense because we're in an iframe. It's loaded every single time. It's always calling bootstrap, and then it's calling mount. And when you leave, we're calling unmount. But let's say we get to a point where we don't have to have the iframe. Then all of a sudden, this becomes what you need in order to do a single page application. So why not build it in from the beginning? And this is right now hooked up to single spar React, but this is where you could write a spar Angular, single spar Vue, whatever you want. Plain JavaScript is also available, right? This is just supplying the lifecycle of it. Our application has this concept of Trackunit providers. They are providing some of the basic functionality in order to use our components. Yeah, I don't want to go too much into details. You guys probably know how the providers work in React. And then we render the application. The application is then just a normal React app or component. And here we're just rendering the HTML. And here we're using the components from our React component library. So in order to know what components are there, you will use the storybook that Casper showed before, find all the components you need in order to build your UI. But in our case, we want to hook up these custom fields. So I'm going to go to our documentation site here and say, let's use the custom field. Then I get a nice description. I should have this installed. I should have this in order to connect to it. And down here, like Casper said, there's a full example that shows you everything. And I'm just going to copy that. And then it complains. So now that I need the custom fields, I just back out and I'll install our custom fields. I notice this is a different package than the React components. So we have at the bottom, we have CSS components. Actually, we have CSS core and we have CSS components are our UI components that are just the CSS versions of those. Then we have React components. And then on top of that, we have our custom field components. So the way we view it is we have complete flexibility down below. And then it gets a little bit more strict, and then React components is a little bit more strict, and then custom fields very strict, but easy to use, right? And that's what we're trying to say. So you could build your own, you could use the custom fields directly through an API to get the values and set the values, and then build your own stuff. But you can also use a component we built, a React component that can just render the custom field. And in that case, we use the React hook form. Just for convenience, it's easier to navigate in. So in here we have, let's see, we have this concept of runtimes. Remember, we are inside an iframe, so you cannot talk to the host unless you have a means of talking to the host. So we build in these simple functions for getting that information out. All of the functions are async, even though they don't necessarily have to be. They're async just because then they are more future-proof than if they're not, right? Let's say we could build everything on one page. The async part will then just go away and it can connect it to the host directly. But in our case, we are using something called penpal to communicate between the iframe and the host. It provides a nice TypeScript interface, so you can just say, yeah, I want to call this, and it sends the data up and data flows back again when it's done. Then we have the UI for it. And all I have to do is say, I want to render a custom field, and the field definition, which I got from that other call, I can render in here, and then everything just works. That works. And then we will. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So we'll do an NX command called run. And then this is the project name from over here. And in there, there's that project JSON. All those targets can be run just like this: :serve, :build, :publish, whatever's in that project file. You can also create your own, which is really nice. This is something we built, so it's very easy to maintain. But you can also plug in a bash command here, so you can build in whatever you want in this NX context.
Let me show the manifest in the app that now have the extension in the top.
This one?
Yeah, so now you show.
So now the application manifest has a link where it imports the owner list, and then the manifest has this list of extensions, and that's the way we merge them in.
So that extension could actually be part of multiple apps, versions of your app, but this one extension be all of them.
So now I'll just go to the same tab again, and now the UI changed. So because I have the definitions in my manifest, I'm able to get that persisted in the database. It seems we're really faking it because it's actually local storage. In this case, we're running locally, right? So those custom fields have not been created in our database yet. That will happen when it goes through the approval step. So we have to manage offline version because then you can test everything here. Complicated, yes. Needed it, absolutely. Because we want to be able to test everything like this. And here, of course, you can name the asset and save the changes. And again, it goes to the local storage. And then if I go here and then crossing our fingers, that works. It's nice to have bugs. And I knew it wouldn't work the first time because I've tested it twice today. But yeah, all right. This allows us to test it. It allows us to very easily create something that goes into our database. Which is really awesome. It takes less than 10 minutes. I've been talking for long, right? But it doesn't take long to create something that provides value for the customer. We can then extract these and pull them into a fleet-wide version where we can pull out how many of them are named Mikkel. And then we can see how many do I own or map it to a phone number or whatever. Right? We can do crazy stuff with very few lines of code. And all it really requires is this magic stuff down here. and then the module federated package, right? So when we can expose this, we can expose any framework out there. And by using it this way, we can support iframes now and something else in the future. And that's really where we are. The same with the module federation. I don't know if you got it, but if you are dependent on the React components in version 16, then I can supply a version 17 and inject it at runtime so that the button goes green instead of orange in this version. And that's just insane to think about. Even though a third-party engineer built this, because I have the list of dependencies, I can say, oh, I'm going to preload React components in the latest version because I want all the fixes in, and then everything looks the same. Of course, you need to be backwards compatible and all that crazy stuff, but it's possible, and that's the nice thing.
So we a performance thing, that you can have a package preloaded, so you can have a cache between apps.
Yeah. Because otherwise, the React components library and everything we're talking about will be downloaded every single time you hit our iframe. But the way we build it, we can actually put React in as a precast version instead of the one coming from your module federated package. So the way module federation works is it has all the dependencies. And if someone else applies it, it'll just use that version. And if you remove that later on, it's still going to work. It's just going to look different. So let's say in 2 years, we don't want to have that link to an old version that someone didn't want to update. We just remove all those versions and say, hey, you're on your own, and then render whatever he built 2 years ago. And hopefully that still works. And the only thing that can go wrong in that is if a HTML spec changes, or if our REST APIs or GraphQL, which they are also allowed to call, will change. And that's why the focus for us going forward will be having a public GraphQL where Iris apps can connect to and make sure that is 100% stable, and all the queries that are coming in will be tested over and over so that we know when we're breaking stuff. But that's for another talk. Did I leave anything out? Nope. To make it sound very easy, it's definitely not, but it's definitely worth it. I think the important part is to notice how well we've made sure that we're never locked in. We're not locked in on the way our components look. We're not locked in on the API. We make sure it's easy for external developers to, when they want to release a new version, they will be forced to upgrade, but there will be TypeScript to tell them, oh, it's actually this line. And hopefully they will just say, oh yeah, you probably changed it to this property instead. We've also talked about upgrades. NX is really good with upgrades. When you do it's called migration from one version to another, they have a migration step they'll chip in, and there you can supply your own upgrade steps. So we could supply an upgrade step and say, oh yeah, we changed the button from button to TU button or whatever we want to call it. And then it'll just magically update all your code when you're doing that update. So there are plenty of stuff to do for us.